We're early for International Talk Like a Pirate Day here on the BWI Daily Edition. Ryan Snyder here with us. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, your ship captain today. We tossed Sean Fitz overboard, and I don't know what this accent is anymore, but
you're having too fun with this.
There's a reason. If you follow me on social media, you already know the reason of what happened. I sustained an injury this weekend that required an eye patch. So this is my homemade eye patch. And Ryan and I thought it'd be fun to start the show like pirates today. He came with more props.
Sword. Yeah. I didn't want T-Frank to be left out, feeling like people were focusing on him on the podcast. So I figured I'll put my pirate hat on and, dive into the theme today. So, yeah, here we are.
You have kids, but that is not a child-sized hat.
Oh, so it's a child-sized hat, buddy. Yes.
You just have a small head?
No, I'm stretching the hell out of it right now. It is very much a child-sized hat. So, I don't know. I just thought it'd be funny to pop on here with a pirate hat and, while T-Frank has his eye patch on. So, but we do need to talk a little recruiting and be a little serious today as well.
We do. For those that didn't hear the story, I got hit in the eyeball with a piece of food that was stuck to a towel. It was like being hit in the eye with a marble. Swelled up, swelled shut, and miraculously, luckily, the cornea is very resilient. So I think I'm actually going to do the show without the eye patch today. But I wanted to know from Ryan, what is your weirdest injury you've ever suffered before we start the show?
I don't know if I have really weird injuries, just through sports, meniscus, and my wrist is terrible. You can't see. I just have a massive scar on my wrist. But a weird injury, I don't know, man. I threw my back out a couple weeks ago just carrying my kids, so I guess that's up there. But never had a chickpea hit me in the face, T-Frank, so I think you take the cake for that one, buddy.
Well, luckily I wasn't making chickpea cake, because that would be gross. Coming out earlier today, the On300, we'll be talking about that, plus some other good news for Penn State football. It seems like the dam is about to break. We'll get into all of that on the BWI Daily Recruiting Show. There we go.
You got to talk like a pirate still?
No. See, the thing is, I have small eyes anyway. I don't have, big, round eyes. So you can't tell, but it's still a little puffy. But I think it's
we can tell.
I don't think it's so grotesque that I can get through the show today. Wasn't expecting to be on the show, but of course Fitz is off. So in another analogy, I'm your utility infielder here on the BWI Daily Edition. I just fill in whenever somebody needs a day off, and here we are, Ryan. The On300 is out. Penn State is getting some good news. Where are we starting on the show today? What do you got for us?
Well, I think we have to start with Kari Jackson, Kenney Woseley, two guys that I think are going to be Nittany Lions here pretty soon. We'll start with Kari Jackson. I think that's the better one to start with. Kari put it out last week that he is aiming to make some sort of announcement Tuesday. I expect it to be a commitment, and I expect him to be committing to Penn State. Kari has not put that out there, but people seem to be feeling pretty good about their chances of landing him. Linebacker prospect out of West Bloomfield in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. Kari played at IMG for a year or two. I think it was his sophomore year. Then he came back to West Bloomfield for his junior season. Visited Penn State, of course, January 28th-ish, I believe it was, for that final junior day. Kari had 103 tackles, 23 tackles for loss, impressive number, 3 sacks for West Bloomfield last year. And I expect him to be a Mike if he ends up at Penn State, which, like I said, I think is trending that way. So that would give Penn State 2 true middle linebackers in this class. Of course, Anthony Specca is already committed out of Central Catholic in Pittsburgh. He's what I would consider a true Mike as well. So if Kari does end up joining the class, like I said, we will know tomorrow. I would think that Penn State's pretty much done with middle linebacker. I think as fans, and even myself to some degree, I think we lob all linebackers together when we talk numbers and things. And Penn State very much does not do that. So I've seen people talking about like, oh, well, what does that mean for Jamonte Waller? What does that mean for Chris Jones? What does that mean for a couple other guys? It means nothing, honestly. They will very much still try to find a true outside linebacker, a little more of a rangy guy if they can get him. Now, with that said, there are, if you look at last year's class, taking 3 linebackers, they're from a numbers perspective, it's not a year where they have to really go all in on linebacker. But I just think there's too much talent, and I think that Penn State sees that as well. They like Speck a lot. They like Jackson a lot. And there's only 2 commitments in this class right now, right? So you have plenty of scholarships to play with and to figure it out then. So I think fans were wondering, why you have Specca. Why would you take Kari at this point when you already have Specca? I just think Penn State sees him as too good of a player to pass up. Kid fits the program really well too. Everything, all my discussions, great academically, great kid. So I don't see any reason why you wouldn't take him at this point if that's what he's announcing, and I believe that is. So we will find out in about 24 hours from now. I don't have a time for that. I'm hoping to work on that and figure that out here soon, but Penn State appears to be getting close to adding their second linebacker in this class.
Yeah, and a really good football player. I think that it's almost becoming a derogatory thing to call somebody a true Mike in these days, because it means you're probably not fast enough to play another position. But I think the thing that these two guys have in common, talking about Anthony Specca as well, is they're really smart football players. And maybe where Specca is a little more raw, a lot more raw. You see that IMG training and you see Kari Jackson. He's really, really good at football with his current size. Obviously needs to get a little bit bigger, but, a guy that has an early projection to the field based on his read and react skills. I mean, his highlight tape is basically like, okay, here's this run scheme, here's me beating this run scheme. Here's this run scheme, here's me beating that run scheme. So he's showing you even on the tape how smart he is to present to you all the options that you would want. We talk about running back, and we say every year they might need to take 2 because of the situation and, how running backs move off the roster. Is this a sign of not maybe how they feel about the current Mike linebacker situation, but is this also a tell of what they think of the future of the position, given what they have now and what they had last year? Or is this, just as you said earlier, it's just about these 2 players being good enough and they want to take both?
That's what I just keep being told, that this is just, they have 2 commitments in the class. It's like, I think people, because they already have a commitment at that position, like I said, why would you take a guy now? But it's not like they don't have a ton to play with. I mean, I just did a scholarship breakdown this past week. I won't, we'll save most of that for premium and subscribers and stuff. But what I would say is this is projected to be a pretty big class. I mean, I think this is going to be a class that's over 25 scholarships. So you can make a case, certainly looking at, some guys breaking through. Like I think everybody just looks at Abdul, right? And they're,
Yes.
why aren't others breaking through? That's, things will be worked out with time. I just think that right now, Kari Jackson, they think is a pretty damn good football player. Anthony Speck is a pretty damn good football player. When you have 2 commitments in the class, you're projecting to maybe have 27 total. Why would you not take a player on February 27th? So
yeah,
that's all I keep being told, is just that it's more about what they think of the players than what they think about their roster.
Yeah, and of course, if he commits, we'll have a T. Frank's film room, but having watched him, I don't have a lot of comments. Like, just not a lot there to say about. Like, he's just good at everything. He's got a pretty clean profile, so adding a football player that's like that, I mean, a high floor, or whatever you want to call it, sort of situation at Mike linebacker, it's interesting that speed is not the primary driver of either of these guys. I think Specca is fast, but I don't think he's, that's not his calling card. And Jackson, I think, if there's an area where it's like he's good at everything, he's good at running. I wouldn't call him a sideline to sideline guy. Does that surprise you at all, given Manny Diaz and how he? It's presumably, when you look at the defense, there's a lot of speed on the field most of the time.
I think they have those guys. I think that's what Tony Rojas is. Yeah. Abdul Carter's that. So I think Kavion Keys is going to be that. So I think they need. I think they've seen maybe some issues against the run, in certain situations, and I think we look at the defensive line for that. But They need some guys in the middle there to muck things up, and guys with size and guys that are going to be physical. And again, it's the one thing I would stress is just the way Penn State looks at this is not linebackers. It's middle linebacker, outside linebackers. They're two. It's like quarterback and safety. It's like defensive end and defensive tackle. They're two. They look at these things a lot differently than I think myself and a lot of fans kind of look at those things. So I just think they need talented guys, and they found two talented guys, and it's really as simple as that. The one other thing I would add too is when you look at Penn State's middle linebacker board, obviously Tyler Elson's a fourth-year guy. He's going to be out of here. And then, Kobe King's already entering his third year. So by the time, these guys even get there, Kobe's going to have one more year left, potentially. Maybe he stays for a fifth year, and maybe Elson stays another year too. But I can see this being Elson's last season, potentially. Kobe would only have one season left. So then you need to re-up, because then you have Keon Wiley, and then you have Tamir. And I think you want at least 3 to 4 middle linebackers every year throughout your depth chart. So the one other thing I would add too is, obviously a lot of people have expectations for Tamir. Manny Diaz went out of his way multiple times this year to call Keon Wiley one of the smartest players in his room. So I just want to make sure we're not already trying to overlook and read into is Keon Wiley not meeting expectations, because genuinely, everything that we've heard, even off the field or off the record, and then publicly through Manny, is that he's been very happy with Keon Wiley's progression too. So I just think it's numbers, man. You're losing Elston. I think you're going to lose Elston this year. You're going to have maybe 1 year left with Kobe, and then all of a sudden you kind of need some middle linebackers, and this is what they're doing. They're going to add these two. As long as Kari commits, and I think he is, then they'll feel pretty good about that.
It's funny. I try to find these common threads or these through lines of okay, what is X looking for in a player? What are the top traits? Blah blah blah. And it turns out, as you just said, they're getting good football players. So we spent a lot of time here on Kari Jackson, but that's not the only player that there's been an RPM pick for recently. Who's next?
Well, Kenney hasn't really. I wouldn't say Kenney was recent. Kenney was the beginning of February. But there's been movement with Kenney as far as he put out his top schools this week. A lot of chatter that he's close to committing. When exactly it's going to come, we'll see. I think it'll be towards the back half of this week. Maybe it'll drag into next week. But I think by the next time we're doing this podcast, Kenney Woseley will be committed. And just look at his top schools. It's clearly Penn State. He hasn't visited Nebraska yet. And I thought, what was his other one? Was it Michigan, I believe? He's been to Rutgers. But, to me, this is a Penn State-Rutgers battle. He's very much a take, very much a priority for Terry Smith. Terry Smith needs numbers in this class as well. There's a lot of positions in this class where they need numbers. And this is a potential 3-4 cornerback class. Depending on how things fall, could maybe be 2 or 3, but I think they could potentially get to 4 if they hit on their guys. And Kenney Woseley, somebody they certainly want. So let's see. Kenny's kind of being quiet on when exactly it's going to happen. I kind of think we're looking at the back half of this week as the time when we could maybe get some moves with Kenney Woseley. But he's been a long priority, man. Penn State offered him. Penn State was the 3rd or 4th school to offer him. Came up, had a great 7-on-7, I think, as a freshman. He's been up here for pretty much every 7-on-7 the last couple of years. Has always performed well. One thing that's funny, whenever I go see Kenney, no one throws at him. So he's one of those guys where I've seen play multiple. I've gone and seen so many Imatep. Sean always corrects me. It's not Imatep, it's Imatep. I just go see many Imatep games, and the Penn Trafford State Championship game last year, I think they threw for 30 yards, so I didn't get to see a lot there. Yeah. And then Bishop McDevitt this past year really didn't throw at him at all. And, of course, you can look at that as, him being on top of his guys and playing well. I just felt like it was kind of a mixture of both where he just really wasn't challenged all that much.
And here's the other thing. Yeah. They play, and this is about being a good team, is they play kind of simple coverage, and he's playing – just don't get beat deep. He's playing a lot of cover 3 shell coverages, so it's preventative as much as it's his reputation. I agree with you. Trying to watch some film on him, and I'm just sitting here skip. Is anything going to happen? That's one of the reasons I hate scouting corners is you could spend 2 days actually finding film and then actually not seeing anything. So what have you heard about his fit at Penn State in terms of slot? I think it's an interesting fit for him at a little bit of a Daquan Hardy mold, a little undersized. He's physical. I know the numbers and getting another corner in the class, but does he have a specific fit, or is he just they're bringing him in to be a corner?
Well, it's just going to depend on the other corners in this class. It's kind of too early to answer that, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, he's a true 5'11", 165. You would think that, and then you look at some of their other corners, they're all 6'1", got that Joey Porter build. You would think that makes sense for Kenney, but talk to me in 6 months from now, and if they added, I don't know, Emilio Agard, for example, he's another guy who's not quite as tall as some other ones. So it's just kind of hard to say at the moment, but I would think that makes a lot of sense. But let's just kind of see on who else they hit in this class. I know they really want John Mitchell. I wrote about John Mitchell last week out of Jacksonville. I think he's a player that all of a sudden we're going to be talking about a lot more. Guy that I think maybe I've been kind of sleeping on a little bit. So keep an eye on him and some others. But Wosley, I mean, he's another kid that just fits the program really well. When he gets the opportunity to make plays, he makes plays, and Penn State's not going to pass up on talented players from Philadelphia. They're always going to take those guys, and Terry's been high on him for the longest time, man. I can't stress enough how well Wosley fits the program too. Awesome kid.
So I wouldn't be doing my job here as the conduit of the people and asking the expert the question if I didn't ask about that Philadelphia angle, Imhotep with Kenney Woseley. How important is that in his recruitment with his evaluation? Obviously, he has to be good enough to be at Penn State. Like, they have been clear about that. But just in general, the view of the Philadelphia angle, trying to make inroads back in there, is this a huge help? Is this how do you view that storyline in this recruitment?
I mean, they've been on Wosley for a long time. I would say, maybe it's something that they would have to think more about if this class was at 18 commitments. I just think it comes down at the end of the day. It's just, are you a player or are you not? And I think that they've always thought that he's a player. So I don't see it as like, oh, we got to take Kenney because we got to get back in with Imhotep. I mean, they've always had good relationships there. I mean, there's been times where they feel like Penn State should take a player and Penn State holds off or whatever. And, that is what it is. You'll find that at every school. I mean, to me, it's still more so like St. Joseph's Prep, for example. That's kind of more the school where I think they need to get more of a foot in the door. But, as far as Philadelphia general, and a lot of these guys also train together too. Just because they go to different schools, they have different, they all train together in some sort of way, different 7-on-7s and things like that. But I don't think it's anything like they're taking him because they need to get in better with that school. I wouldn't say that at all. I think they just think he's a good player.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else on Woseley that you think is interesting we haven't covered yet that I haven't asked you?
Not really. I like to see him a little more in a 7-on-7 setting this year. Like I said, every time I go see him play live, I don't get a lot out of it. And then of course, when I do go to 7-on-7 up at Penn State, there's 40+ teams. I watch him, but there's always a couple committed players or something like that. I haven't felt like I've been able to focus on him as much as I'd like to. So I'd like to see him a little bit more in action this spring and summer. But I think he's a quality player. I think he's a guy that's going to end up being right on that 4-star, 3-star bubble. Like right now he's an 88. I could see him kind of staying between that 88 and 90 bubble throughout the course of the year there. So I think if he's certainly one of those guys where I think like skill set and all that works. I think it's just 5'11". I think that's a big reason why they kind of look at him as a high 3-star at the moment. So we'll see if anything, if he grows or anything like that. I think he's for the most part pretty maxed out. Has better reach than I think people realize too. But yeah, I see him being a high 3-star, and let's see how things progress over summer. Maybe he can crack that low 4-star range.
So Penn State projected now to get 2 more players, doubling the size of the class of 2024. And, of course, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com if you want more insider information on those players and more details that Ryan isn't telling you right now, because this is our YouTube channel. This is where we talk to the people about the stuff. But if you want the real inside details, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, sign up for $29.99, and you get access now until the start of football season for that price. So you get all that insider information, and we'll get you all that stuff there. And as always, subscribe here to the YouTube channel, like the video, hit notifications, always helpful to the almighty algorithm, which we're all battling every day like the wind when you're out at sea, to continue our pirate metaphor. Now, let's get on to the main topic of the show today. The On300 was released this afternoon. There's been some movement, some surprises, and Ryan's going to break all of it down, and I'm going to give my voice a rest because that pirate voice I did earlier was it gave me a little more gravel today. So Ryan, take it away.
Well, I think the big takeaway, I would say, there's about 64, 65, I believe it is, guys that I think Penn State's seriously in the mix with. That list is for free over at BWI, so check it out. Anybody can read it. I just put the list together of the guys that I think Penn State's truly in the mix with, or important guys for them. Out of that 60-some, they've already hosted over 50 of them. I think that's a very important number. Obviously, they got a lot more visits to come, but considering the 2024 class is just kind of starting, it's not really just starting, but really coming into focus. Already having 50-plus guys on campus is a great sign. I'll go through it, 100 or 1 to 100, 101 to 200, and so on, just to kind of break it into the pieces. That's kind of how I always look at it. At the top, you have Dylan Stewart now out of Friendship Collegiate Academy, defensive end. He is the #1 rated player in the country now. He was always going to be a 5-star guy. I think his previous rating was number 5. So it's a big jump because he's #1 now, but not a big as far as some of these other numbers, some of these other guys. For example, Benedict Ume, Avon Old Farms prospect, who we've talked about quite a bit here, jumps from outside the On300, unrated, to number 24 in the nation. That is a massive jump and a sign that he is a potential 5-star guy. And honestly, he is probably him and Gerby Lambert. Gerby Lambert's at number 30. I would mark those two as Penn State's best opportunities to land a potential 5-star player in this class. Of course, things are going to shuffle around more. Let's see where they are at, in summertime, things like that. But there are, I look at Ume, and he hasn't visited Penn State yet, but there's no doubt in my mind, just from the early relationship and ties to different people that he has, that Penn State should be a serious player with him. So all of a sudden, he's becoming that guy that I think if Penn State's going to get a 5-star in this class, he makes a lot of sense for that. So, of course, I said Gerby Lambert's at number 30. A couple other notables, Caleb Odom, who we learned last week's taking an official visit to Penn State in June. He had a massive jump up from number 118 to number 38, tight end out of Georgia. So I haven't talked to Caleb a whole lot, so I want to learn more there on his interest. I think the general thought is he'll probably still end up staying down south, but here we go again. Ty Howe putting Penn State in good positions with top tight end prospects. So let's see how that progresses in the months to come. A couple other guys. Jordan Lyle out of St. Thomas Aquinas, running back. Another big jump from him, up from number 98 to number 53. Yeah, Vabu Torre up to number 58. He was previously number 79. Liam Andrews drops a little bit down to 57. He was at previously number 41. Then you got a couple other guys here that I highlighted. You got the John Mitchell, Jacksonville, cornerback that I knew Penn State was in the mix with. He came up for the whiteout game, but the more I'm learning, I think Penn State is in a very good position with him. They might be the team to beat at this point in his recruitment. He jumps from number 217 to number 61 in the country. A lot of comparisons with Joey Porter Jr. That's Penn State's angle there, just from a size perspective. They like him a lot. So Mitchell with the big jump. Ethan Callaway, offensive tackle out of North Carolina, up from 126 to number 71. And you have two more in the top 100. You have Darian Mayo, defensive end out of Good Counsel. He jumps from previously unrated to number 92. And then you have Quentin Martin at number 99. Quentin was previously number 73. So I think Quentin Martin's a little bit better than 99 personally. I still think he's a top 50 prospect. I think if you watch Bell Vernon this year, and I was able to do that twice, they used him a lot as decoy, and he wasn't able to put up some of those big stats. And I think when you're comparing him to all these national prospects, I think that may be part of it. And then it's also positionally too. I mean, Quentin Martin right now is being recruited as a running back, and I think a lot of people think that there's other positions, whether it be wide receiver, whether it be linebacker. He's even brought up defensive back. So I think that the positional flexibility is a good thing, but it's also making it a little bit harder, I think, for Charles and them to grade him a bit. So I still have Quentin Martin as without a doubt. I mean, without a doubt, the best player in Pennsylvania in my mind, and somebody that Penn State's going to be going incredibly hard after, no matter where the hell he ranks in these ratings.
I want to ask you about Ume quickly. Defensive end or defensive tackle? Because his frame is huge, and I know he's unbelievably advanced from a physical perspective, so he might just look like a defensive tackle right now and be a defensive end. What do you get the sense there of what his position might be?
So we have him at 6'5", 240. The issue is he hasn't visited anywhere yet. So I don't know how legit that number is. And until he gets to Penn State, it's kind of hard to figure that out. I mean, his coach has made it clear, talking to Coach Hooley, John Hooley up at Avon. I mean, he thinks that one of those guys who probably comes in as a DN, potentially grows into an interior guy down the road. But again, I kind of need to see how legit those numbers are. I mean, there's no reason for me to doubt those numbers, seeing pictures and all that. I mean, he's very impressive looking prospect. I think 6'4", 6'5", I think it was 6'5". Yeah, 6'5", 240. I mean, if he's 6'4", that's fine. I think all those numbers are probably going to be where he ends up. But just got to see how he grows too. Is he one of those guys that's really gone through his growth spurt and kind of stays there? Because it's similar to Jameel Lyons in some ways. I thought Jameel Lyons absolutely going to grow into an interior guy, and they never really added any weight for a year and a half. So just kind of hard to say right now. You have another year and a half to go until that has to get absolutely sorted out. But I would think that he comes in as a defensive end and see how he grows.
Yeah, he just the way he looks on film, he's got the build of a defensive tackle. But you never know, because all of the different competition levels, and you mentioned not having all of the details there. Quentin Martin, again, you mentioned the positional thing. I guess I don't have another question about that, just other than it just seems very low. It just seems very low for a player that has the athleticism of a guy like Quentin Martin. Do you think that he was another guy that grew early and a lot of guys caught up to him, or is it really kind of the situation you described?
I went and saw him play a game this year. He had like 20 yards rushing. Like it was more than that. I'm exaggerating.
Yeah.
It was like 40, 50. But I just think for someone like Charles, for example, right? Quentin Martin hasn't been to any camps. He did go to a 7-on-7, and that was a good performance for everything I understand. But it's just from getting key numbers. Charles cares about numbers, as he should, right? The film is very important too. We don't have key numbers on Quentin, 40s, things like that. And we also don't have the growth on film that we saw. I mean, it gave a lot of. I mean, Bell Vernon won a state championship for a reason. They have a lot of playmakers around him. They found success this year, kind of using Quentin more as. I'm not saying he wasn't valuable. They used him a lot, but they had other guys that could get in space when you have Quentin Martin getting double teamed all the time. So I think that's part of it. And again, it's also February though. So talk to me when these are done in May, then it'll be done in July, then it'll be done midway through the season. Such a long way to go. I mean, I added, if you go to the site and read the list, look at the bottom of the list too. I had all these guys that dropped out. I mean, half those guys that dropped out are going to jump back in. It's just, we're breaking down a list that's 15% done right now. So things will shuffle. They always do. To me, Quentin Martin is, I still think, a top 50 guy. And I think Penn State firmly believes that too from talking to them. So that's, they know as much as Charles and them are awesome, I'll still lean a little bit towards Penn State's grading of Quentin Martin.
Yeah. The last thing I'll ask you is this, kind of like the Philadelphia question. And I know this probably is not your favorite question to answer because it's going to be the same answer. It's February, but path to a top 10 class? Is there? Do you see one here?
You ask the craziest questions, dude. I don't know.
That's what people want to know. People want to know, like, okay, so here's the list of players. Like, is this? Can you get a combination and permutation to get to the top 10? You gotta get to the top 10.
Yeah, there's 60 players here. There's 60 players here who are awesome. Yeah, if they land 20 of the top 300. Yeah, sure they will. But I don't know, man. It's so early for that. It just. Talk to me. I mean, I think you can honestly answer that when we get to official visits. That's when you can really figure that out because you know what they have now. You know who's leaning that way. I mean, there's just so many guys who, like, they came for a game. They saw spring practice this year and next year. Like, they're in the ballpark with a ton of guys. But Penn State's also trying to compete with Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Clemson. I mean, if you're trying to compete at that top level, you're going to miss on a lot of these guys that right now they look like to be in great positions with. So, again, I guess the one thing I would come back to is you got to land 5 stars. You want to be a top 10 class, you got to land 5 stars. When I look at the top of this list right now, I don't see a lot of 5 stars Penn State has a great chance with. I think Benedict Ume, number 24, their best opportunity. Dylan Stewart's visited a little bit. Aaron Scott's going to probably end up at Ohio State. Mylan Graham is a really good wide receiver out of Indiana. Has visited once. We'll see. It's kind of hard to figure out the wide receiver board with the recent change, but no, I don't see another 3 5 stars like they did 2 years ago at the moment. No, I don't see that.
So then the next question, and this is actually my curveball question, opening up the playoff, does that change your criteria at all of the general conversation of being in the top 5 to compete for a national championship, being in the top 10 routinely to compete for being in the playoff? Does that change anything, or what Penn State has been doing, is that now good enough because the threshold has changed?
I'm trying to understand your question. Like, I don't think anything's going to change with the playoffs. Is that what you're saying? Like, are they going to recruit on a different level?
No. What I'm saying is the college football playoff is expanding. So there has been a clear line of you need to be above this in recruiting and develop that talent in order to get to the playoff. Like, that has been pretty well documented in this current format. The format is changing. So is the question I asked originally even a valid one? Because what Penn State has been doing of being in the top 10 to 14.
Okay.
That puts them in the playoff now, right?
Yeah.
Like, is it now that question we need to put less emphasis on that because they can meet the criteria to get into the big dance where then chances and luck and fate can happen.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say luck in college football is nearly as lucky as in college basketball, for example. You know, like there's a reason Georgia's kicking everyone's ass right now, and that's because they have dogs there. I mean, what's the Bulldogs? Nope. I don't know what joke I'm trying to say there, but I look, the Penn State's going to be a playoff team moving forward. Are they going to get over the hump? They got to beat Ohio State. They got to beat Michigan. They got to, yeah, sure, you can keep recruiting a different level. I don't think a whole lot's going to change. I still see Penn State recruiting between top 15 and top 8 classes, and sure, if they can put some wins together with Aller down the road and, progress. Yeah, maybe that'll help recruiting, but they're always going to be at a disadvantage though, being in the Northeast until you get to Ohio State's level where you can truly recruit nationally. This isn't a situation where Georgia, for example, I mean, I haven't gone through this whole list, but I bet there's 20, 30 guys within Atlanta probably on this list. I mean, it is what it is. Georgia's always one of the deepest states. So you're always going to be at a disadvantage from that level unless you start consistently beating Ohio State all the time and, getting to the semifinals or the playoffs, something like that. But there's a long, long, long way to go before we get to that point.
Anything else from the On300, which again, you can go check out his.
Yeah, we got a ton. I only went to the top 100 guys. So we've got a lot of stuff to go through. I mean, Jordan Thomas, 106 in the country now, defensive lineman out of New Jersey. I think Penn State's going to definitely be in the mix. Adding Khalil Ahmed's important. I also think NIL is going to have a big impact there. So let's just see how that recruitment shakes out moving forward. You have Kevin Haywood at number 119 now. Haywood right now, I think, is probably the offensive lineman Penn State sits in the best position with. I think William Satterwhite as well. Satterwhite was in the On300. He just dropped out. He's right on one of those bubble guys now. And I will say Haywood's a tackle. Satterwhite's an interior guy, so a little different. But, Haywood moving up from 183 to 119, certainly good for Penn State. I think that there's a real chance that Haywood potentially is their top-rated offensive lineman in this class, depending on Gerby Lambert. I think Penn State's fading a bit with Liam Andrews. We'll see, but I'm not getting as good of vibes there as we once were. So just a couple other guys, though, in that 100 to 200 range. You have Chance Robinson, St. Thomas Aquinas, moving up from 203 to 150. I think people are really starting to realize how good of a player Chance Robinson is. I think we talk about Keelan Adams a lot, but if Penn State really could only take one wide receiver, I think there's quite a few people that would lean towards Chance Robinson within the Lash building. And that's not a knock on Keelan. Obviously, they need multiple receivers. They want both. Right. But I just think that speaks to how highly Chance Robinson is on their board. So when you get to the bottom then, 190 to 200 range, there's a couple guys. You got Deontay Armstrong, of course, the Armstrong twins. Deontay moves from 269 to 194. You have Malachi Williams, another Philadelphia guy who, of course, Penn State was his first major offer after he came to junior day in the beginning of January. He goes from unrated to number 195. I think Sean and I talked about Malachi in the recent podcast. I think we did. This guy like we're sleeping on. Like what I'm getting at here is what I will say is I did a top 5 story recently of most important guys going in the spring. And when I put my original list together, he wasn't on it. And then when I reached out to a bunch of people that know the actual list, they made sure that he was on it. So I think it just speaks to Philadelphia guy who in Penn State's eyes is becoming massively important. I think in some ways he's maybe now the second most important prospect in Pennsylvania behind Quentin Martin. I think that's how highly he's moving up Penn State's board. So you also have Nair Daniels, too, number 199 in the country. He was previously unrated, the 6'7", 350-pound offensive lineman out of New Jersey, who he was just on campus as well in January. Anything else? When we go through just roll through the next ones?
Do you want to? Yeah. I don't have any questions.
I don't have any questions. I don't know.
No. So with Daniels, I think like there's a lot of growth potential there by getting smaller. Like I do think like I've said before, like one of the reasons I got into scouting is because I didn't trust other talent evaluators. But Charles and I agree a lot on these things. I think 199 is a great place for Daniels right now. He just needs to kind of unlock that athleticism. You can see the movement skills, but he's bogged down by being 350. So changing
he's 370
that
now. Let me clarify. Yeah, he's 370.
Let's get to 350 then and see what happens. I loved Deontay Armstrong. I loved just looking at him in person. He is built the way you want a tackle to be built. So those guys are super important. I like Kevin Haywood too, obviously. He's got, I think, pretty narrow fit in terms of what offensive line position he might work out at, but he also would be very good at that position. So pretty strong here in the offensive line through the 200s. Yeah.
Sorry. Very strong here. Yeah, and then Devontae, his brother, too, is at number 247. He was at 299 previously. So both Armstrong brothers are moving up in the ratings. Both are incredibly important. Both also just got Ohio State offers not that long ago, by the way. So let's see. That's I think that those offers are going to change up some things. But, in that bottom half, there's not as much movement upwards. There's obviously, when you get to the bottom half, more so guys moving down. Josiah Brown, the Long Island prospect, moving down to number 240. He was number 50 previously. That's a big jump, and one I need to talk to Charles about, kind of see what he's learned there. He's still an incredibly important prospect for Penn State. Of course, you have Cooper Cousins at number 271. He was number 219 previously, so Cooper drops about 50 spots. Still with On300, but certainly a guy I want to talk to Charles about. Samaj Jones, 241. Samaj actually moved up a little bit, quarterback at a St. Joseph's Prep. He was previously 251, now 241. Not that big of a move. And then you also have Michael Van Buren. He dropped from number 202 to number 297. So this bottom half of the list, certainly a lot of guys that I'll be reaching out to Charles about. I usually reach out to Charles, and I'll do a story later in the week on just kind of his thoughts on some of the key guys. And a lot of those guys will be part of that. There were some guys, too, that dropped off the On300. I want to make sure we just note a couple of them. Duke Watson's a running back we talked about a lot from Georgia. Guy who's very high on Penn State. He fell off the list. Let's see, who else do we have here? We have Kosh Sanders, defensive back out of New Jersey, dropped off the list. I mentioned William Satterwhite earlier, dropped off the list. Dominic Nichols, Maryland defensive end, dropped off the list as well. And then Jacob Smith, obviously defensive end out of he's originally from Kentucky. He's now up in New England schools. He dropped off too. So a couple guys dropping off, but again, this rating is going to be done. This ranking is going to be done. I don't know, 4, 5, 6 more, probably more than that. I think it probably 5, 6, 7 more times between this is all done. They usually update it every 2 to 3 months, basically. So long way to go. And then they actually do it at the end. They do it like 3 times within the span of 2 months, I believe it is. So I think it's 6 more updates. So long way to go. And a lot of these guys are going to fall off. There's going to be a lot of guys who are unrated now who are going to jump into it. Don't put crazy stock into some of this stuff, but I do think it's important because this is only the second rendition, and it's also the update since the season for a lot of these guys. And that's why it's important, because this is kind of the foundation now of the On300. The first one is what we think we know, but we really need to see more film. Now, this is where I consider this the start of the list. And now guys are going to continue to move, but maybe not quite as drastic as some of the moves we saw this week.
I think it's interesting and illuminates the quarterback situation. You mentioned Samaj Jones, 241, Michael Van Buren, 297. And also, if you're not in on Mike Yurcich, his ability to evaluate quarterbacks is obvious to me, because Luke Kromenhoek now is a top 60 player. Yeah, previously unranked. We because he's committed to Florida State and that whole situation. That's as you've mentioned, that's their top guy. And I think it also, to what you and Fitz have been talking about here about quarterback, is like, it's a tough cycle. it's going to be a really tough cycle for them because Kromenhoek, their top guy, committed to another school, and then the other guys in the region are just kind of floating at the bottom of the On300, which is a good place to be in considering, all of the players that play high school football. But when we're talking about that conversation we had in the middle of the show about where is your program going, and with, now 2 years since Drew Aller, you're hoping to get another blue chip quarterback. Is that possible this cycle? And I think that kind of illustrates that.
Yeah, I mean they're 4-star quality guys. They're undersized a little bit. I think that's part of it. Like Samaj Jones, I know Charles likes Samaj Jones a lot. It's just he's like 5'10", and obviously that's a concern at the next level. So we'll see how these guys move up and down the board. Obviously with 7-on-7s coming up, that is important. Especially, I mean, you take anything from 7-on-7s, it's quarterback and wide receiver play, and cornerbacks too to some degree. But we'll see. I think they're gonna get one of those. I feel pretty good about them getting Samaj or Van Buren. It's really hard for me to see both of those guys in the same class though, and they will take 2 quarterbacks this year. So I do still think somebody that we're not talking about will potentially emerge. Of course, we weren't really talking about Drew Aller. We're starting to talk about Drew Aller 2+ years ago. And of course, Boca Beulah was already committed by then. So we'll see how it shakes out. I do feel, Van Buren, I think, is kind of leaning towards Penn State. Samaj has been very quiet and kind of hard to read, but they feel good about both. Let's just see which one jumps first.
All right. Now, any last thoughts about the On300?
No, not really. I don't have much more to add. I mean, I will say Jaden Bradford dropped off too. He was somebody I didn't leave on earlier, another quarterback guy. But no, I mean, it's a good list. Like I said, I think there's a lot here. This is kind of how I look as the foundation of it. And let's see where things go from here. But Quentin Martin, I think, is a little bit too low. And there's a couple other guys that I think are really finally getting their due, like Benedict Ume, Luke Kromenhoek's another one. We'll see where things go.
All right, so that'll do it today for the BWI Daily Edition. This is the recruiting show. We'll be back tomorrow with a live show at 7 p.m. Got some great stuff coming up this week. The Combine is starting, so I talked to Max Chadwick of PFF. He's their college analyst, their lead college analyst, and I found out during the interview, a huge Penn State fan. So for people that go, bah, PFF, he's one of you. On the so check that out. I think we'll be doing that on Wednesday. So check that out here, and of course subscribe so you don't miss it. Hit notification button so that you know when we drop all of our live airings of the show and when we go live on Tuesday, so you can be a part of it. Answer question or ask questions, have them answered, give your opinion, all the great stuff here on the show. That's Ryan Snyder. I am Thomas Frank Carr. Fitz will be back next week on the recruiting show. We'll talk to you later.